In a small, forgotten village, where the air smelled faintly of pine and rusted rain, there stood a clock shop no one truly remembered entering for the first time. It had always been there, sitting quietly at the corner of the square, with a wooden sign that had long since lost its letters. Inside, 100 clocks ticked, each with a rhythm of its own. None of them were in perfect time, and that was exactly how Herr Ansel, the clockmaker, liked it. Elias came to the shop on a winter morning when the mist was thick enough to muffle footsteps. He was young, curious, and poor. He needed work, and the village had told him there was one man who never turned away an honest pair of hands. The old clockmaker looked up from his workbench as the boy entered, spectacles fogged, coat dusted with frost. "You're late," Herr Ansel said, though Elias was not. Then he smiled slightly, a faint twitch under his mustache. "That's good. Only the living are late. The clocks have no such problem." The boy didn't know how to answer, so he nodded, and that was how his apprenticeship began. Each morning, Elias wound the clocks, tall ones that breathed like trees, small ones that whispered, brass ones that gleamed like candlelight. Herr Ansel spoke little, but when he did, his words stayed in the room long after the sound had gone. "Every clock," he said one evening, "is a promise someone made to time. Some promises are kept, some are only remembered." Elias asked what that meant, but the old man only smiled. Days turned into weeks, and the boy began to hear patterns in the ticking. Some clocks seemed hurried, others patient. He noticed that when a traveler came into the shop, certain clocks would change their rhythm, as if listening. One afternoon, he asked about a strange clock that stood in the far corner, tall, wooden, and utterly still. No pendulum, no tick, no sound. "That one," Herr Ansel said quietly, "belongs to the sea." Elias frowned. "But we're nowhere near the coast." "Not any more," the old man replied. "It was owned by a sailor. He left it here before a voyage. Said he'd return when the clock began to tick again. That was 40 years ago." The boy stepped closer. The hands were frozen at 3:12. Dust had gathered thick along the frame. Without thinking, Elias reached out to wind it. The clock refused to move. Herr Ansel shook his head. "It won't start until someone remembers him. Clocks like that don't need oil. They need memory." That night, Elias dreamt of the sea, a deep, endless blue where clocks floated like buoys. He heard their ticking echo across the waves. When he woke, he felt the sound still in his ears. From then on, each evening before leaving the shop, he stood by the sailor's clock and whispered a name. He didn't know the man's real name, so he made one up, Jonas. He said it softly, as if not to disturb the silence. Winter melted into spring. The snow gave way to slow green shoots. Herr Ansel began to walk slower, speak less. But the clocks never stopped. They filled the shop with life, steady and sure, like 100 hearts beating in conversation. One day, Elias returned from lunch to find the door open and sunlight spilling across the floor. Herr Ansel was seated by the window, hands folded in his lap, eyes closed. There was no movement, but a smile lingered on his face. The shop was silent. Elias stood there, unsure what to do. Then he noticed it, the sailor's clock. It had begun to tick, slow, heavy, perfect. He sat beside the old man until evening, listening to that sound. The shop, once filled with many rhythms, now held one, calm, even, eternal. The village buried Herr Ansel by the church. No family came. Elias locked the shop for 7 days. When he returned, he began winding the clocks again, one by one. But something had changed. When he touched each clock, he could hear faint echoes, laughter, voices, a melody someone once hummed. The clocks spoke to him, not in words, but in feeling. He realized Herr Ansel had not built clocks to keep time. He had built them to hold it. Years passed. Elias grew older. People came and went, but the little shop remained the same. Sometimes travelers would stop and ask for repairs. Sometimes they'd stay a while, listening to the ticking, as if the sound reminded them of something they'd lost. One rainy afternoon, a woman brought in a pocket watch. It was cracked, its hands stuck at midnight. She said it belonged to her father, who had died long ago. Elias opened it carefully. Inside, scratched faintly into the brass, were the words, "For when I forget the sound of your laughter." He repaired it that night. When the hands began to move again, he could almost hear faint laughter echoing in the distance. In that moment, he understood what Herr Ansel had meant. Time isn't something we measure. It's something we listen to. Years rolled by quietly. The apprentice became the master. The shop filled once more with uneven, beautiful ticking. And one evening, long after the lamps had burned low, Elias stood by the sailor's clock again. Its pendulum swung smoothly, steady as breath. He whispered, "You came home after all." He walked to the window and looked out at the dark square. The village slept. Snow began to fall. Inside, every clock beat softly in harmony, a living heartbeat stitched from memory and silence. Elias closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him. It was no longer noise. It was language. Each tick said a name. Each chime told a story. Each silence held a life that had passed but never disappeared. The boy who had once wound the clocks now understood their secret. Time doesn't move forward or back. It listens. And in that listening, all things are kept alive. Every face, every voice, every promise whispered into the endless rhythm of ticking hearts. The clocks kept going. The village slept. And somewhere, in the small shop at the corner of the square, time itself continued to breathe.